$1. Sarah Mitchell's voice cut through the crowded courthouse like a blade. Every head turned. Every whisper died. The auctioneer froze his gavel suspended in mid-air. He stared at the pregnant woman standing alone in the back row, her hand raised steady, her other hand resting on a belly swollen with 7 months of new life. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you understand what you're bidding on. That cabin has killed 3 families. 3 families, ma'am, dead, every last one of them." Someone laughed, then someone else. The laughter spread through the room like wildfire, cruel and sharp. $100 says she's gone by Thanksgiving, a man in the front row called out. "I'll take that bet," another voice answered. "She won't last the week." Sarah didn't flinch, didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge their existence at all. "Sold," the auctioneer finally declared, bringing down his gavel like a judge passing sentence. "To the lady who just bought herself a grave." The laughter exploded. Sarah walked through it without a word. Her golden retriever Honey pressing close to her leg, her head held high. Despite the tears, she refused to let fall. $1. 1 ruined cabin. 1 chance to build the life her dead husband had promised her. Before we continue this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel and follow Sarah's journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from, so we can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The clerk's office smelled like old paper and older regrets. Sarah stood at the window signing documents that would make her the legal owner of 35 acres of frozen Montana wilderness and 1 cabin that locals called the Widow's Curse. "You know the history." The clerk wasn't asking. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many tragedies to believe in happy endings anymore. "I know. The Hendersons froze to death in '52. Father, mother, 2 little girls. Found them huddled together in bed like they were just sleeping." The clerk's voice was flat reciting facts. "The Kovacs lost everything in a fire in '78. Faulty chimney. They ran back to Ohio and never looked back." Sarah kept signing. "And the Reyes family." The clerk paused. Something shifted in her expression. "Thomas Reyes hung himself in the barn on Christmas morning 2007. His wife Elena found him. Their 2 children saw everything. The little boy was 6 years old." Sarah's pen stopped. Just for a moment. Then she finished her signature with a flourish. "That was their story," she said quietly. "This one's mine." "Stories don't change curses, honey." "Then I'll write a new ending." She took the deed and walked out of the clerk's office into the November cold. Honey was waiting by the truck, tail wagging, despite the temperature, despite everything. At least the dog still believed in her. Sarah knelt down, ignoring the ache in her back, and wrapped her arms around Honey's neck. "It's just us now, girl. Us and the baby. And 1 really broken cabin." Honey licked her face. Her tail never stopped wagging. The drive took 40 minutes on roads that deteriorated with every mile. Sarah had seen the photos online. She had studied the county records. She had told herself she was prepared. She wasn't. The cabin looked like something that had surrendered to death years ago. The roof caved inward like a crushed skull. Windows gaped empty, stuffed with newspapers that had rotted to brown dust. The front door lay flat in the dirt, torn away by some forgotten storm. Sarah got out of the truck. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and mean. "Daniel," she whispered, 1 hand on her belly, 1 hand on the truck for support. "Daniel, what did I do?" Daniel didn't answer. Daniel was in a cemetery in Denver, 3 months dead from a brain aneurysm that had given no warning and stolen everything. She walked toward the cabin. Honey followed, whimpering softly. The inside was worse. Animal droppings everywhere. The fireplace had collapsed stones, scattered like broken bones. A smell of rot and abandonment hung so thick she could taste it. Then she saw something that stopped her cold. A child's shoe. Pink, small. Abandoned in the corner near the collapsed fireplace. Sarah picked it up. The leather had stiffened with age, but she could still see where a little girl's foot had worn it smooth. One of the Reyes children, left behind when they fled this place after finding their father's body swinging in the barn. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry for what happened here, but I'm going to make it right. I promise." She placed the shoe gently on what remained of the windowsill. A memorial. A vow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting nothing, hoping for nothing. The number was from Denver. Her stomach dropped. "Mrs. Mitchell." The voice was male, professional, cold. "This is Gerald Hutchins from First Mountain Bank. I'm calling about your husband's outstanding debt." Sarah closed her eyes. "My husband died 3 months ago." "Yes, ma'am, we're aware. However, there's still the matter of $17,000 remaining on his business loan. As co-signer, you're legally responsible for the full amount." "I don't have $17,000. "I understand, ma'am. That's why I'm calling. The bank is prepared to offer you a payment arrangement. However, if we don't receive a minimum payment of $5,000 within 30 days, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action." Sarah looked around the ruined cabin, at the collapsed roof, at the rotting walls, at the pink shoe sitting on the windowsill like a ghost. "30 days," she repeated. "30 days, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm sorry for your loss, but business is business." The line went dead. Sarah stood in the ruins of her new home holding a phone that had just delivered a death sentence and laughed. The sound was sharp and broken, echoing off walls that had witnessed too much tragedy already. "30 days," she said to Honey. "We have 30 days to turn this into something, or we lose everything." Honey's tail wagged. She didn't understand deadlines or debt or death. She only understood that her human needed her. That was enough. For now, that had to be enough. The town of Pinewood was 7 miles away. Sarah drove there the next morning with her list of supplies written on the back of an envelope and her remaining money calculated down to the penny. Daniel's life insurance had been $47,000. The funeral had taken $12,000. Medical bills ate another $8,000. The drive from Denver. The truck repairs the trailer she'd bought to live in while she worked on the cabin. Those had cost nearly $10,000 more. She had $17,000 left, the exact amount she owed the bank. If she paid the debt, she'd have nothing. No money for supplies. No money for food. No money for the baby that would be born in 9 weeks whether she was ready or not. If she didn't pay the debt, she'd lose everything anyway. The hardware store in Pinewood was called Chen's Supply. Sarah pushed through the door with Honey waiting in the truck and found herself face to face with a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the same granite as the Montana mountains. "Help you?" The woman's voice gave nothing away. "I need supplies. Building materials. Tools." "Building what?" "A cabin. The old Henderson place." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition. And something else that might have been pity. "You're the one who bought Widow's Peak." "That's what people call it." "That's what it is." The woman came around the counter. She was maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back tight and hands that showed decades of hard work. "I'm Martha Chen. I own this store. My husband built it. My son will inherit it. And you're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or you've got a death wish. I'm pregnant and alone, and I just got a call from a bank telling me I have 30 days to come up with $5,000, or they'll take everything I have left." Sarah's voice cracked just slightly before she pulled it back under control. "So maybe I am crazy, but crazy's all I've got." Martha studied her for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. "Your husband," Martha said. "What did he do?" "Construction foreman. He died 3 months ago. Brain aneurysm. No warning." "He teach you anything?" "He taught me everything." Sarah's hand went to her belly without thinking. "He taught me that buildings are just problems waiting to be solved. He taught me that anything broken can be fixed if you're willing to do the work. He taught me that love isn't just words, it's what you build together." Her voice broke again. This time she couldn't stop it. "He was supposed to be here," she whispered. "We were supposed to do this together. Buy some land, build a house, raise our kids away from the city. And now he's gone. And I'm alone, and this baby is going to be born into nothing unless I figure out how to turn a pile of rotting wood into a home." Martha was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to a shelf and pulled down a worn leather journal. "This belonged to Elena Reyes," she said. "The woman whose husband killed himself at Widow's Peak. She was fixing up the cabin before everything went wrong. Renovation notes. Plans she never got to finish." She held it out to Sarah. "I've kept it for 12 years. Don't know why. Maybe I was waiting for someone stubborn enough to try again." Sarah took the journal like it was something holy. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Martha started walking through the store pulling items from shelves. "I'm giving you everything on credit, full credit. No payments until spring." "Why would you do that?" "Because my second husband died of cancer 19 years ago, and after he was gone, I almost burned this store to the ground just so I wouldn't have to look at everything he'd built." Martha's voice was steady, but her hands had stopped moving. "I understand what you're doing, Sarah. You're not just building a cabin. You're building a reason to keep breathing." Sarah couldn't speak. The tears came before she could stop them freezing on her cheeks in the cold air of the store. Martha handed her a handkerchief. "Now stop crying and tell me what you need. You're burning daylight." That night, Sarah sat in her camping trailer reading Elena Reyes's journal by flashlight. Most of it was practical. Measurements, supply lists, diagrams showing how to reinforce the walls, how to rebuild the chimney, how to insulate against Montana winters. But near the middle of the journal, the handwriting changed. It became smaller, more cramped, harder to read. Sarah held the flashlight closer. December 3rd. Thomas hasn't been sleeping. He says he hears things at night. Footsteps on the roof. Whispers in the walls. I tell him it's just the wind, but he looks at me like I'm the one who's crazy. Sarah turned the page. December 10th. Something is wrong with this place. I found Thomas standing in the barn at 3 a.m. last night, just standing there staring at the rafters. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was measuring. Measuring what he wouldn't answer. Another page. December 15th. The children are scared. They say Daddy talks to himself when he thinks no one's listening. They say he talks about the cold. About how the cold gets inside you and never leaves. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help him. I don't know if this place is doing something to him, or if he's just... The entry stopped mid-sentence. The next page was blank. And the next. And the next. The last entry was dated December 24th, 2007. Christmas Eve. It contained only 3 words. God forgive me. Sarah closed the journal. Her hands were shaking. It's just a story, she said out loud. Just a sad, tragic story about a man who was already broken before he ever came here. Honey whined from her spot at the foot of the bed. The cabin didn't kill him. Sarah continued, her voice harder now. Depression killed him. Isolation killed him. His own demons killed him. Not the cabin. She looked out the trailer window at the dark shape of the ruined structure silhouetted against the stars. You're just a building, she whispered. Just wood and stone and nails, and I'm going to prove it. The first week was demolition. Sarah attacked the ruined roof with everything she had, ripping away rotted wood and crumbling shingles, throwing debris into a pile that grew taller than her head. She couldn't do the heavy lifting, not with the baby, but she could organize, she could plan, she could direct. Tommy Blackwood showed up on day 3. He was 19 years old, the son of a local rancher sent by Martha Chen, with a note that said simply, "He's strong and he's not an idiot. Use him." Ma'am. Tommy stood at the edge of the property staring at the cabin like it might bite him. You sure about this? No, Sarah admitted. I'm not sure about anything, but I'm doing it anyway. That's either brave or crazy. Everyone keeps saying that like they're different things." Tommy laughed despite himself. Then he picked up a hammer and got to work. They worked from dawn until dark. The roof came down piece by piece, the skeleton of the old structure slowly revealing itself. On day 5, Tommy found something buried in the debris. "Sarah." His voice was strange. "You need to see this." She climbed over a pile of rotted wood to where he was standing. In his hands was a small wooden box, blackened with age. "Found it wedged between the rafters," he said. "Like someone hid it up there on purpose." Sarah took the box. It was lighter than she expected. She opened the lid. Inside was a photograph, black and white, faded with age. It showed a young couple standing in front of the cabin. The cabin as it must have looked when it was new 60 years ago. The woman was smiling. The man had his arm around her waist. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Henrik and Anna Henderson. First day in our new home. May God bless this place." Sarah stared at the faces of the first family to die in this cabin. The father who had frozen to death with his wife and 2 daughters when a blizzard collapsed their roof. They looked so happy, so hopeful, so completely unaware of what was coming. "They thought they were building a future," she said softly. "Just like me." Sarah. Tommy's voice was careful. "Maybe we should stop. Maybe this place really is—" No. The word came out harder than she intended. No. They failed because they weren't prepared. They built wrong. They didn't understand Montana. She looked at Tommy with fierce determination. "I'm not going to make their mistakes. I'm going to build this right. I'm going to prove that this place can be a home. And if you're wrong, then I'll die trying. But at least I'll die doing something instead of running away." Tommy held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Then let's make sure you don't die." The town came to watch. They parked on the road at the edge of the property and observed the pregnant woman directing demolition like a general commanding troops. They whispered among themselves. They made bets on how long she would last. 2 weeks, said one. 1 week, said another. She won't survive the first real storm, said a third. Gerald Hutchins arrived on day 8. Sarah was hauling a load of salvageable lumber when the black sedan pulled into the driveway. The man who stepped out was wearing a suit that cost more than everything she owned combined. Mrs. Mitchell. His voice was the same cold, professional tone from the phone. "I thought I'd deliver this in person." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a formal notice of default. "You have 22 days, he said. $5,000 or the bank begins foreclosure proceedings on all your assets, including this property. This property cost $1. It's still an asset." Hutchins looked at the cabin, at the debris, at the pregnant woman covered in dirt and sweat. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to be honest with you. The bank doesn't want to foreclose. It's expensive. It's time-consuming. It generates bad publicity." "Then what do you want?" "We want to make this easy. Sign over the life insurance and we'll forgive the remaining debt. You walk away clean. Start fresh somewhere else." Sarah stared at him. "The life insurance is all I have. It's the only thing standing between my baby and the streets." "Then I suggest you find another option." Hutchins turned back toward his car. 22 days, Mrs. Mitchell. The clock is ticking." He drove away, leaving Sarah standing in the dirt with a foreclosure notice in her hands and a future that was rapidly disappearing. That night, she sat in her trailer doing math on the back of an envelope. $17,000 in savings. $5,000 owed to the bank in 22 days. That would leave $12,000 for supplies, food, and everything else until the baby came. It wasn't enough. It was nowhere near enough. But paying nothing meant losing everything. "Think," she said to Honey. "There has to be another way." The dog just looked at her with those trusting brown eyes. No solutions, only faith. Sarah picked up Elena's journal, flipped to the renovation plans, started calculating costs. If she could finish the roof herself, she'd save $3,000 in labor. If she salvaged materials from the demolition instead of buying new, she'd save another $2,000. If she learned to do the electrical and plumbing herself instead of hiring contractors. It was insane. It was impossible. She was 7 months pregnant with no construction experience trying to rebuild a ruined cabin in the Montana wilderness in winter. But impossible was all she had left. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Here's what we're going to do." She started writing. A plan, a timeline, a list of everything that needed to happen in the next 22 days. By morning, she had filled 6 pages. By noon, she was back at the cabin working harder than ever. November 15th brought the first real cold. Sarah woke to find ice on the inside of her trailer windows and her breath crystallizing in the air. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees overnight, and the forecast promised worse to come. The roof frame was almost done. Tommy and his brother Kevin had worked 14-hour days to get the rafters in place. Now they needed shingles, tar paper, and a miracle. Martha arrived at noon with a truck full of supplies. "Don't say anything," she warned before Sarah could speak. "This isn't charity, it's an investment." "Martha, you survive the winter, you become my best customer for the next 50 years. Long-term business strategy." Martha started unloading materials. "Now shut up and help me carry this." They worked together in silence, stacking shingles and rolls of tar paper beside the cabin. When they finished, Martha stood back and looked at the structure with a critical eye. "You're going to make it," she said. It wasn't a question. "You sound sure." "I am sure." Martha turned to face her. "Because you remind me of myself 40 years ago. Young, stubborn, too stupid to know when to quit." She smiled slightly. "Those are the people who survive out here. The smart ones give up and go home. The stupid ones stay and build something. Which one were you? I'm still here, aren't I?" The accident happened on November 18th. Sarah was carrying a load of lumber lighter pieces she could manage despite her belly when her foot caught on a frozen root hidden under the snow. She went down hard. The world tilted. The sky and ground switched places. She twisted as she fell desperately trying to protect the baby and landed on her side with a force that drove the breath from her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Could only lie there in the snow, one hand pressed against her stomach, terror flooding through her like ice water. "Sarah." Tommy's voice far away. Then hands lifting her, careful but urgent. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" She didn't know. God help her, she didn't know. The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Dr. Patterson, the only doctor in Pinewood, examined her with gentle hands and an expression that revealed nothing. Sarah lay on the table staring at the ceiling, her hand gripping the edge of the bed so hard her knuckles turned white. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," Dr. Patterson finally said. "No signs of distress, no bleeding. You're incredibly lucky." The relief hit Sarah so hard she nearly sobbed. "But..." The doctor's voice hardened. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're 7 months pregnant. You're working 12-hour days in freezing temperatures doing physical labor that would exhaust someone who wasn't carrying a child. You fell today. What happens when you fall tomorrow? Or the next day? I can't stop. You'll kill yourself. Or the baby. Or both. I can't stop." Sarah sat up, her hands shaking. "I have 19 days to come up with $5,000 or I lose everything. I have 9 weeks until this baby is born. I have a cabin with no roof and no heat and no floor, and winter is coming, and I can't stop because stopping means dying." Dr. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "Then get help," she finally said. "Real help, not 1 or 2 teenage boys, a crew, a community." She leaned forward. "Pride is a luxury you cannot afford, Mrs. Mitchell. Your baby needs you alive. Whatever it takes to make that happen, you do it. Understand?" Sarah understood. She just didn't know how to make it happen. The answer came 2 days later from an unexpected source. Robert Chen, Martha's son, pulled into Sarah's driveway with a truck full of lumber. He climbed out slowly, his expression somewhere between embarrassed and defiant. "My mom says I've been an ass," he said without preamble. "She's right." Sarah stared at him. This was the man who had bet against her survival, who had called her cabin cursed, who had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her or her foolish dreams. "Why are you here?" "Because my dad helped build the original addition to this cabin back in '79. Robert looked at the structure, at the new rafters rising against the gray sky. Before the fire, before everything went wrong, he always said the bones of this place were good, that it just needed someone to love it right. He turned back to Sarah. "Dad's got Alzheimer's now, doesn't remember my name most days. But last week Mom told him someone was fixing up the Henderson place, and he smiled. First time he's smiled in months." Robert's voice caught. "He said, finally, someone's finally going to save it." Sarah didn't know what to say. "So I'm here?" Robert continued. "Not because I believe in curses or miracles or any of that crap, but because my dad believed in this place once, and maybe helping you is a way to honor that." He started unloading lumber. Sarah watched him for a moment, then she picked up the other end of a board and helped him carry it. They worked in silence, but something had shifted, something important. Word spread. Old man Peterson showed up the next day, 78 years old, and carrying tools that were older than Sarah. "I built houses in this county for 50 years, he announced, "going to make sure you don't kill yourself doing it wrong." June Blackwood came with her sons, a woman who had raised 4 boys alone on a ranch after her husband left. "Stupid pregnant women are the strongest women," she told Sarah. "I should know, I was one." The Hendersons' granddaughter drove up from Billings. She was 62 years old, and she stood in the ruins of the cabin where her mother had died, and she wept. "Fix it," she told Sarah through her tears. "Please, fix it so their deaths meant something." By November 25th, Sarah had a crew of 12 working on the cabin. By November 28th, the roof was done. She stood in the snow as the last shingle went into place, her hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "Daniel, we did it." The cabin had a roof. Not perfect, not pretty, but solid, strong, built to hold whatever Montana threw at it. Tommy climbed down from the ladder, his face red with cold and triumph. "One down," he said. "Only about 100 more things to go." Sarah laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd heard from herself in months. "Then we better get started." December came with teeth. The first week brought temperatures that made November feel like spring. 0 degrees, below zero, the kind of cold that killed the unprepared without mercy. But Sarah was no longer unprepared. She worked on the interior, now the space finally protected by the new roof. Peterson taught her how to rebuild the fireplace stone by stone, explaining angles and drafts and the physics of heat that could mean the difference between life and death. "The trick is the draw," he said, watching her work. "Get it wrong. Smoke fills the room. Get it right, the fire pulls like a dream." "How do I know if it's right?" "Light a fire and find out." She lit the first fire on December 10th. Held her breath as the flames caught. Watched the smoke begin to rise. It went straight up the chimney. Clean. Perfect. No smoke in the room. Peterson smiled. "Your husband would be proud. He never taught me this." "Wasn't talking about the fireplace." The old man gathered his tools. "I was talking about the faith. The belief that you could figure it out even when you didn't know how. That's harder to teach than any skill." Gerald Hutchins returned on December 12th. Sarah was sealing gaps in the walls when the black sedan pulled up. She didn't stop working. 15 days, Mrs. Mitchell." Hutchins stepped carefully across the work site, trying to keep his expensive shoes clean. "I hope you've found a way to come up with the money." "I'm working on it." "Working on it isn't good enough." He looked around at the cabin, at the new roof, at the walls being slowly transformed from ruin to refuge. "I have to admit I'm impressed. I didn't think you'd get this far." "Glad I could surprise you. But impressiveness doesn't pay debts." Hutchins pulled out another envelope. "This is a final notice. $5,000 by December 27th. If we don't receive payment, we begin legal proceedings on the 28th. December 28th, 3 days after Christmas. Business doesn't take holidays, Mrs. Mitchell." Sarah finally stopped working. She turned to face him, her hands covered in mud and straw, her face streaked with dirt, her belly heavy with the child she was fighting to give a future. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Hutchins. 3 families died in this cabin. 3 families who gave up, who let this place break them, who ran away or fell apart, or couldn't take the pressure." She stepped closer to him. "I'm not going to be the 4th. I'm going to finish this cabin. I'm going to give birth to this baby. And I'm going to build a life here that proves everything you think you know about debt and loss and giving up is wrong." That's a lovely speech. It doesn't change the balance sheet. "No, but it changes me." Sarah smiled, and there was something fierce in it. "I'll have your money, Mr. Hutchins. Maybe not by the 27th, maybe not by the 28th, but I'll have it. And when I do, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember the pregnant woman covered in mud who told you she was going to win. Because I am going to win, and you're going to watch it happen." Hutchins stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, something other than cold professionalism flickered across his face. "I hope you're right, Mrs. Mitchell," he said quietly. "I genuinely hope you're right." He drove away. Sarah watched until his car disappeared around the bend. Then she went back to work. December 15th. Sarah moved into the cabin. It wasn't finished. The floor was still rough plywood in places. The windows had plastic sheeting instead of proper glass. There was no running water, just a hand pump outside that she had to break ice from every morning. But there was heat. There was shelter. There was a roof that didn't leak and walls that didn't let the wind through. There was home. Honey explored every corner, sniffing at the new wood, the fresh smells, the unfamiliar spaces. Then she found the spot by the fireplace that would become hers, forever circled 3 times, and lay down with a contented sigh. Sarah hung one decoration on the wall, a wooden heart Daniel had carved for their first anniversary. "For our first home," he'd written on the back. Wherever that is. Now it hung in a cabin in Montana, 1,500 miles from Denver, in a place Daniel would never see. Sarah traced the words with her finger. Then she sat down by the fire and let herself cry. Not from sadness, not exactly. From everything. The grief and the gratitude and the exhaustion and the hope all tangled together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the others began. Honey came and laid her head in Sarah's lap. "We did it, girl," Sarah whispered. "We really did it." But even as she said the words, she knew the hardest part was still coming. She had 12 days to find $5,000. She had no idea how. Martha came on December 18th with news that changed everything. "There's a contest," she said without preamble, sitting down at Sarah's rough wooden table. "Every year, the Montana Historical Society gives grants to people preserving historic structures. First prize is $10,000. Sarah's heart stopped. 10,000. Applications closed December 20th. Winners announced Christmas Day. Martha slid a folder across the table. "I already filled out most of it. You just need to write the essay and sign." "Martha, I can't." "Yes, you can." The older woman's voice was firm. "You've got a story, Sarah. A good one. A pregnant widow buying a cursed cabin for $1 and turning it into a home. That's the kind of story that wins contests. And if it doesn't, then you're no worse off than you are now." Martha stood. "But I've got a feeling about this. Call it intuition. Call it hope. Call it whatever you want. but I think you're going to win." Sarah looked at the application, at the blank space for the essay, at the chance she hadn't dared to hope for. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Really?" Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because my husband George died, thinking he'd left me nothing but a hardware store and a pile of debt. And I spent years being angry at him for that. Angry at myself for staying. Angry at the world for taking him." She looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much loss. "Then one day I realized that the store wasn't just a building. It was a love letter. Every shelf George built, every nail he hammered, every hour he spent making it perfect, that was him saying, 'I love you,' in the only language he knew." Martha's voice caught. "And I almost burned it down because I was too blind to see it." She reached out and took Sarah's hand. "You're not blind, Sarah. You see exactly what this cabin can be. You see the love letter your husband would have written if he'd had the chance, and you're writing it for him." She squeezed gently. "That's why I'm helping. Because everyone deserves someone who sees their love letters for what they really are." Sarah wrote the essay that night. She wrote about Daniel, about the dream they'd shared, about the baby growing inside her, who would never know its father, but would grow up in a home he would have been proud of. She wrote about the cabin, about its history, about the families who had suffered here, and the curse she was determined to break. She wrote about the community, about Martha and Tommy and Peterson, and all the others who had showed up to help a stranger, because helping was what people did when they remembered how to be human. She wrote until 3 in the morning, until the fire burned low, and Honey fell asleep at her feet, and the words finally stopped coming. Then she sealed the envelope and prayed. December 23rd. The storm warning came. "Big one," Tommy said, stopping by to check on Sarah. "Biggest of the year, they're saying. Could hit Christmas Eve." "How bad?" "Bad enough that you shouldn't be alone out here." He shifted uncomfortably. "My mom says you should come stay with us until it passes." "I can't leave the cabin?" "Sarah." "I know." She cut him off gently. "I know it's dangerous. I know it's stupid. But I've come too far to run away now." She looked at the cabin, at everything she'd built with her own hands and the hands of people who had become like family. "Whatever comes, I face it here, in my home." Tommy stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then we'll make sure you're ready." He spent the rest of the day helping her prepare. Extra firewood stacked inside. Water stored in every container she had. Food enough to last a week if necessary. By sunset, Sarah was as ready as she could be. "Merry Christmas," Tommy said as he left. "I'll come check on you the moment the storm passes." "Merry Christmas, Tommy. Thank you for everything." She watched his truck disappear down the road. Then she went inside, closed the door against the gathering cold, and waited for whatever was coming. The storm hit at 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Sarah had lived through storms before. This wasn't a storm. This was war. The wind screamed across the property at 60 miles an hour. Snow fell so thick she couldn't see the hand pump 20 feet from the door. The temperature plummeted toward 30 below. But the cabin held. The roof shed snow. The walls blocked wind. The fireplace radiated heat. Sarah sat in the rocking chair Peterson had given her, one hand on her belly, watching the flames dance. "We're okay," she whispered to the baby. "We're okay." At 11 p.m., the temperature inside started dropping. Sarah noticed it gradually at first, a chill that crept in despite the fire, a cold that seemed to seep through the walls. She checked the windows. Sealed. She checked the door. Tight. She checked every gap she'd filled with mud and straw. Nothing. The cabin was secure, but the cold kept coming. At midnight, she found it. A gap in the floor, near the back wall, where the old foundation had shifted in ways she hadn't seen. Cold air poured through like water through a broken dam. Sarah dropped to her knees. The gap was too big to fill with mud. Too big to block with rags. The foundation itself had cracked and the frozen earth beneath was bleeding cold into her home. She had maybe 2 hours before the cabin became uninhabitable. Maybe less. "Think," she said out loud. "Think. What would Daniel do?" Daniel would have noticed this weeks ago. Daniel would have fixed it properly. Daniel would never have let this happen. But Daniel was dead. And Sarah was alone with a crack in her foundation, a blizzard outside, and a baby who would die if she couldn't figure this out. She looked around the cabin, at everything she had, at everything she could use. The foam mattress from the trailer. She'd brought it inside weeks ago. It was thick, insulating, designed for exactly this kind of cold. She dragged it across the floor, shoved it against the gap, piled blankets on top, furniture, everything heavy enough to hold it in place. The cold slowed, stopped, but it wasn't enough. She could feel it. The seal was temporary. The mattress would shift. The gap would open. The cold would come back. She needed something permanent, something that would hold until morning. Her eyes fell on the bag of mud mixture she'd used for chinking. It was frozen now, useless in its current state, unless she could thaw it. Sarah dragged the bag to the fireplace, set it as close to the flames as she dared. Waited. 5 minutes. 10. The mud began to soften. She worked it with her hands, mixing and kneading, getting it to a consistency she could use. Then she crawled back to the gap, moved the mattress just enough to access the crack, and started packing mud into the foundation with her bare fingers. The cold bit at her hands. Her fingers went numb. She kept working. Pack, press, smooth, repeat. Pack, press, smooth, repeat. She worked until the mud was gone, until the gap was sealed, until she couldn't feel her hands at all. Then she collapsed against the wall, gasping, shaking, utterly spent. Honey came and pressed against her, warm, solid, alive. "We're okay," Sarah whispered. "We're okay." At 2 a.m., the temperature inside stopped dropping. At 3 a.m., it started rising. At 4 a.m., Sarah finally let herself believe she might survive the night. She fell asleep in the rocking chair with Honey at her feet and the baby kicking gently against her ribs, dreaming of Daniel smiling at her from somewhere far away. The knock came at dawn. Sarah jerked awake, disoriented. The fire had burned low. Gray light filtered through the plastic-covered windows. The storm had passed, and someone was pounding on her door. She rose slowly, her body aching, her hands still raw from the night's work. Crossed the cabin, reached for the handle. "Please." A voice weak and desperate, barely audible through the wood. "Please help us. My children. They're dying." Sarah opened the door. A woman stood on her threshold. Behind her, barely visible through the dissipating snow, was a car buried in a drift. And next to the car, a man was carrying 2 small bodies toward the cabin. 2 children, unconscious, blue with cold. "Please," the woman sobbed. "Please, we saw your light. We've been walking for hours. Please don't let them die." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Get inside," she said. "Now, all of you, get inside." She didn't know who they were, didn't know their names or their story, or how they'd ended up here. All she knew was that her cabin, the cabin she'd built from nothing, the cabin everyone said was cursed, had just become the only thing standing between 2 children and death. And she was going to save them, no matter what it took. Sarah grabbed the man's arm and pulled him inside. The children in his arms weren't moving. Their skin was the color of ash. Their lips had turned a shade of blue that Sarah had only seen in nightmares. "Put them by the fire," she ordered. "Now, on the floor, close as you can get them without burning." The man obeyed without question. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the smaller child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Blankets," Sarah said to the woman who was standing frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide with terror. "Behind you. Grab everything you can. The woman didn't move. "Hey!" Sarah crossed the room in 3 steps and took the woman's face in her hands. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Jennifer." The word came out as a whisper. "Jennifer Morrison." "Jennifer, I need you to focus. Your children need you to focus. Can you do that?" Something flickered in Jennifer's eyes. The fog of shock began to lift. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Tell me what to do." "Blankets. All of them. Now." Jennifer moved. Sarah turned back to the children. The boy was older, maybe 10. His breathing was shallow but steady. Hypothermic but not critical. He would survive. The girl was different. Sarah knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. The pulse was there, but barely. Thready. Weak. Fading. "What's her name?" Sarah asked the father. "Lily." His voice cracked. "She's 5. She got cold first." Jennifer gave her her coat, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. "How long were you out there?" "I don't know. Hours. Our car slid off the road around midnight. We couldn't get a signal. Couldn't find the road. We just walked toward your light." 6 hours. Maybe more. In 30 below temperatures. It was a miracle any of them were still alive. Sarah pulled off Lily's frozen clothes, working as fast as her numb fingers would allow. The child's skin was ice. Her body had stopped shivering, which meant her core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. The shivering reflex only worked above a certain point. Below that, the body simply gave up. "I need warm water," Sarah said. "Not hot. Warm. There's a pot on the stove. Fill it from the bucket by the door and put it on the fire." The father moved to obey. "Jennifer, I need you to get in that bed with your son. Skin-to-skin contact. Share your body heat with him. Understand?" "But Lily." "I'll take care of Lily. You take care of Marcus." Jennifer hesitated for just a moment. Then she climbed into the bed and pulled her son close, wrapping herself around him like a shield against the cold that had almost killed him. Sarah turned back to Lily. The girl's breathing was getting slower. Her pulse was getting weaker. She was slipping away 1 heartbeat at a time. "Come on," Sarah whispered. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with me." She wrapped the child in every blanket she could find. Tucked hot cloths under her arms and against her neck and between her legs, all the places where blood vessels ran closest to the surface. The father kept bringing warm water, kept heating cloths, kept doing exactly what Sarah told him, without question or hesitation. Honey appeared at Sarah's side. The dog looked at the dying child, then at Sarah, then back at the child. Without being told, she lay down next to Lily and pressed her warm body against the girl's side. "Good girl," Sarah murmured. "Good girl. Keep her warm." The minutes crawled by. 5, 10, 15. Lily's color didn't change. Her breathing didn't strengthen. Her pulse didn't steady. "She's not getting better." The father's voice was raw with terror. "Why isn't she getting better?" "It takes time. The body has to warm from the inside out. We just have to keep going." "What if it's not enough? What if she—" "Don't." Sarah cut him off, her voice sharp. "Don't say it. Don't even think it. Your daughter is going to live. Do you understand me? She is going to live." The father stared at her. In his eyes, Sarah saw the same desperate hope she had felt when she'd stood in front of this cabin for the first time, looking at a ruin and seeing a home. "How do you know?" he asked. "Because I didn't build this cabin for nothing. Because I didn't survive last night for nothing. Because there has to be a reason we're all here in this place at this moment." Sarah looked down at Lily, at the small body, fighting a battle it was too young to fight. "Your daughter found the only light for miles in the middle of the worst storm of the year. That's not luck. That's something else." "What?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." At 7:47 a.m., 43 minutes after the Morrison family stumbled through her door, Lily's eyes opened. "Mommy!" Jennifer was across the room before Sarah could move. She gathered her daughter in her arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak, rocking back and forth as if she could hold Lily close enough to keep death from ever touching her again. The father, David, collapsed against the wall. His whole body was shaking. Tears streamed down his face. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. "Thank you. Thank you." Sarah sat back, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Her hands were raw from working. Her back ached from kneeling on the hard floor. The baby was kicking frantically, as if it too had felt the tension of the past hour. "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank the cabin. It's the one that saved you." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The cabin had sheltered them, but she had built the cabin. She had created the warmth that had pulled a 5-year-old girl back from the edge of death. Maybe Martha was right. Maybe she was building something more than walls and a roof. Maybe she was building a reason to believe in miracles. By noon, the immediate crisis had passed. Marcus was fully recovered, wrapped in blankets by the fire, eating soup that Sarah had heated from her dwindling supplies. Lily was still weak, but improving rapidly, her color returning, her voice growing stronger with each passing hour. David Morrison sat at Sarah's rough wooden table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, staring at her like she was something he couldn't quite understand. "You're pregnant," he said. 7.5 months. And you're alone out here. For now. In a cabin you bought for $1. That's right. David shook his head slowly. "Who are you?" Sarah almost laughed. It was the same question she'd been asking herself for months. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said. "I'm a widow. I'm going to be a mother. And I'm someone who doesn't know how to give up." "You saved my daughter's life." "I did what anyone would do." "No." David's voice was firm. "You didn't. Anyone else would have turned us away. Anyone else would have said they couldn't help, that it was too dangerous, that they had to think of themselves first. You didn't even hesitate." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 3 families died in this cabin before I came here. The first froze to death when their roof collapsed. The second lost everything in a fire. The third..." She paused. "The husband killed himself on Christmas morning. His wife and children found him." David's face went pale. "Everyone told me this place was cursed," Sarah continued. "Everyone said I was crazy to try to save it. But I didn't believe in curses. I believed that a building is just a building. That the only thing that makes it good or bad is what people do inside it." She looked around the cabin, at the fire burning steady, at the children recovering by its warmth, at the family that had found shelter from a storm that should have killed them. "This is what I want this place to be," she said. "A home, a refuge, a place where people come to be saved, not to die." David was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'm a journalist," he said. "I write for the Denver Post. I was on my way to my mother's house in Billings when the storm hit." He slid the card across the table. "When we get out of here, I'm going to write your story. And I'm going to make sure the whole world knows what you did." Sarah looked at the card, then at David, then at the cabin that had started as a ruin and become something she never could have imagined. "I didn't do it for a story," she said. "I know, that's exactly why it's worth telling." The roads remained impassable until December 27th. For 3 days, Sarah and the Morrison family lived together in the cabin. Jennifer insisted on cooking, claiming it was the least she could do, and Sarah discovered that her supplies could produce meals far better than anything she'd made for herself. Marcus followed Sarah everywhere, asking questions about the cabin, about construction, about how she'd learned to do all this. "My husband taught me some things," she told him, "and I taught myself the rest." "Can you teach me?" Sarah handed him a hammer. First lesson. This is the most important tool you'll ever hold. Treat it with respect. Lily recovered completely by the second day. She made friends with Honey, instantly spending hours brushing the dog's fur and whispering secrets in her ears. When Sarah asked what she was telling Honey, Lily looked up with solemn eyes and said, "I'm telling her thank you for keeping me warm. She saved my life." Sarah had to turn away so the girl wouldn't see her tears. David worked on the cabin during the days, helping with repairs that still needed to be done, and sat with Sarah by the fire at night, sharing stories. He told her about his career, the wars he'd covered, the tragedies he'd witnessed, the moment he'd decided that journalism wasn't worth the cost it was taking on his family. "I was supposed to resign this week," he admitted. "I was going to tell my editor that I was done, that I wanted to be a husband and father instead of a byline. And now I realize I've been telling the wrong stories." He looked at Sarah with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I've spent 20 years writing about death and destruction and everything terrible that humans do to each other. But stories like yours, stories about hope and survival and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, those are the stories that matter. Those are the stories that change the world. I'm not extraordinary. You bought a cursed cabin for $1 while 7 months pregnant, rebuilt it with your own hands, survived a blizzard that should have killed you, and saved my daughter's life on Christmas morning." David smiled slightly. "If that's ordinary, I'd hate to see what you consider special." The morning of December 27th, Sarah woke to the sound of engines. She went to the window and saw a convoy coming up the road, snowplows, emergency vehicles, and behind them, a familiar pickup truck. Tommy Blackwood was the first person through the door. "You're alive," he said, and his voice cracked. "Holy crap, you're actually alive. I told you I would be. Yeah, but I didn't believe you." He looked around the cabin at the Morrison family packing their belongings at the fire still burning strong. "What the hell happened here?" "It's a long story. I've got time." But before Sarah could answer, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. A black sedan. Familiar. Unwelcome. Gerald Hutchins stepped out. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, picking his way across the snow-covered ground. "I see you survived the storm. I see you survived too. Pity." Hutchins' expression didn't change. "Today is December 27th. Your payment was due yesterday." "I know what day it is." "Then you know that the bank will be initiating foreclosure proceedings tomorrow." He pulled out a document. "Unless you have $5,000 you haven't mentioned." Sarah felt her stomach drop. In the chaos of the storm and the struggle to save Lily's life in the days of living with the Morrison family, she had almost forgotten about the debt, about the deadline, about everything that was still hanging over her head. "I don't have it," she admitted. "Not yet." "Then I'm afraid." "Wait." David Morrison stepped forward. His expression was hard, dangerous. "Who are you?" "Gerald Hutchins, First Mountain Bank." "And you are?" "David Morrison, journalist. The pregnant woman you're trying to throw out into the cold just saved my daughter's life on Christmas Day." David moved closer, and something in his posture made Hutchins take a step back. "If you foreclose on her, I will write a story that destroys your bank. I will make sure every person in America knows that First Mountain Bank tried to take everything from a pregnant widow who built a home with her bare hands and then used it to save a dying child." Hutchins' face went pale. "That's not... I have photographs. I have recordings. I have a 5-year-old girl who can look into a camera and tell the world that she would be dead right now if not for Sarah Mitchell and the cabin your bank wants to take away from her." David smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "How do you think that story plays in the press, Mr. Hutchins? How do you think your shareholders react?" Hutchins was silent for a long moment. Sarah could see him calculating, weighing the cost of foreclosure against the cost of bad publicity. "The bank might be willing to extend the deadline," he said finally, "given the circumstances. You'll forgive the debt entirely." "That's not possible." "It's not a request." David pulled out his phone. I can have a camera crew here in 3 hours. By tonight, this story will be on every news channel in the country. By tomorrow, your bank will be a national disgrace. He held up the phone. Or you can walk away right now and tell your bosses that the debt has been satisfied through extraordinary circumstances. Your choice. Hutchins looked at David, at Sarah, at the cabin that had started as a joke and become something neither of them had expected. I'll need to make a call, he said. Make it. Hutchins walked back to his car. Through the window, Sarah could see him talking on the phone, gesturing, arguing. The conversation went on for 10 minutes, 15, 20. Finally, he hung up and walked back to the cabin. The bank has agreed to forgive the remaining debt, he said. His voice was flat, empty of any emotion. In light of the exceptional circumstances and the positive publicity the story is likely to generate. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The weight that had been crushing her for months lifted so suddenly, she felt like she might float away. Thank you, she managed. Hutchins nodded stiffly. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Mitchell. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. David watched him go. Then he turned to Sarah with a grin. You're free, he said. You did it. You actually did it. Sarah sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Her hands were shaking. Her vision was blurring with tears. I didn't do anything, she said. You did. I just threatened a banker. You built a home and saved a life. David knelt beside her. Sarah, you don't understand what you've done. Not just for my family. For everyone who's going to hear this story and think maybe I can do something impossible too. Maybe I can build something from nothing. Maybe there's hope for me after all. It's just a cabin. No, David said softly. It's so much more than that. The Morrison family left that afternoon. Jennifer hugged Sarah so hard she could barely breathe. I don't know how to thank you, she said. I don't know if there are words. There don't have to be words. Just live. Be happy. Raise your children to be kind. I will. I promise. Marcus shook Sarah's hand with the solemnity of a much older boy. I'm going to learn to build things, he said. Like you did. I'm going to help people. I know you will. Lily was last. The 5-year-old looked up at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much, and somehow still believed in everything. Will you be my friend? She asked. Sarah knelt down, ignoring the protest from her back and her belly. I'd be honored to be your friend, Lily. Forever. Forever. Lily threw her arms around Sarah's neck. I love you, she whispered. Thank you for not letting me die. Sarah held her tight, breathing in the smell of childhood and innocence and hope, and made a silent promise to never forget this moment. I love you too, sweetheart. Now go be with your family. She stood on the porch and watched them drive away. David's arm was out the window, waving until the car disappeared around the bend. Tommy stood beside her. That was something, he said. Yeah. You know your life is about to change, right? When that story comes out. Sarah put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked strong and insistent. My life already changed, she said. The day I bought this cabin for $1. Everything since then has just been following through. The story broke on December 29th. David Morrison didn't waste any time. His article appeared in the Denver Post under the headline, Christmas Miracle in Montana, Pregnant Widow's Dollar Cabin Saves Dying Child. Within hours, it had been picked up by national outlets. By the end of the day, Sarah's phone was ringing nonstop with requests for interviews. Camera crews were trying to find directions to her property. The story was everywhere. But Sarah didn't care about any of that. She cared about the email that arrived at 6 p.m. on December 29th. Dear Mrs. Mitchell, it read, on behalf of the Montana Historical Society, we are pleased to inform you that your application for the preservation grant has been successful. Your essay was unanimously selected by our committee as the most compelling submission we have received in the 23-year history of this award. You have been awarded the first prize of $10,000 along with official recognition of your property as a site of historical and cultural significance. $10,000. Sarah read the email 3 times to make sure she wasn't dreaming. She was debt-free. She had a completed cabin. She had $10,000 in grant money. And the story of what she'd done was being shared across the country. She was going to make it. After everything, she was actually going to make it. The phone rang. She answered without looking at the number. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is CNN. We'd like to talk to you about appearing on our morning show." Sarah hung up. The phone rang again. "Mrs. Mitchell, NBC News here. We're doing a feature on..." She hung up again. The phone rang a third time. This time she checked the number. Martha Chen. "You've gone viral," Martha said without preamble. "The whole town's watching the news. Everyone's calling me asking how to reach you." "I don't want to talk to reporters." "Then don't. But you should know something." Martha's voice softened. "People are sending money. To you. To the town. They're calling the hardware store asking how to help the pregnant widow who built a miracle." "I don't need money. I won the grant." "It's not about need, honey. It's about people wanting to be part of something good." Martha paused. "There's already over $15,000, and it's still coming in." Sarah sat down. $15,000. Plus the grant, plus the forgiven debt. In the span of 2 days, she had gone from facing foreclosure to having more money than she'd had since Daniel died. "What do I do with it?" "That's up to you. But if I were you, I'd think about what this cabin could become. Not just for you, for everyone." Sarah looked around the cabin. At the fireplace she'd built. At the roof that had held against the storm. At the spot where Lily Morrison had almost died and instead found a second chance at life. "I have an idea," she said slowly. "But I'm going to need help." "You've got a whole town ready to help. Just tell us what you need," Sarah told her. January came with new snow and new purpose. The money kept coming. By the end of the first week of January, Sarah had received over $50,000 in donations from strangers across the country who had heard her story and wanted to be part of it. She used every penny. The cabin expanded. A second room for the baby. A proper bathroom with running water. A covered porch where visitors could sit and watch the Montana sunrise. But that was just the beginning. Sarah bought the adjacent lot from Robert Chen. She started building a second structure smaller than the cabin designed to be a workshop and classroom. She hired Tommy and Kevin Blackwood to help with the construction. She brought in Peterson to supervise. "What exactly are you doing?" Peterson asked on the third day, watching Sarah pore over blueprints she'd drawn herself. "I'm building a school," she said. "A place where people can come to learn how to build things, how to fix things, how to turn nothing into something." "Who's going to teach?" "I am, and you, and anyone else who has something to share." Peterson was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and for once the old man's weathered face looked almost young. "I've been waiting 50 years for someone to ask me that," he said. "Let's get to work." January 12th. Sarah woke at 3 a.m. with a pain in her belly that was different from anything she'd felt before. Her first thought was terror. The baby wasn't due for 3 more days. It was too early. Something was wrong. Her second thought was acceptance. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. She called Martha. "It's time," she said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't move." "I'm not going anywhere." She hung up and sat down by the fire. Honey came and pressed against her leg, sensing that something important was happening. "It's okay, girl," Sarah murmured. "We're going to be okay." The contractions came faster, stronger. Martha arrived with the midwife, a woman named Elena, who had delivered half the babies in Glacier County. "How far apart?" Elena asked, already pulling on gloves. 5 minutes, maybe less." "Then we don't have time to get to the hospital. This baby's coming now." Sarah nodded. She had known it would happen this way, had known somehow that her child would be born here in the cabin she had built, surrounded by the walls that had sheltered her through the worst winter of her life. The labor lasted 6 hours. Sarah screamed and pushed and cried and laughed, and through it all she thought about Daniel, about the dream they had shared, about the home he would never see, and the child he would never hold. "I'm doing it, Daniel," she whispered between contractions. "I'm doing it for both of us." At 9:37 a.m. on January 12th, Hope Daniel Mitchell entered the world. She weighed 6 pounds 4 ounces. She had her father's eyes and her mother's determination. She screamed her first breath with a fury that shook the rafters. "She's perfect," Elena said, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Sarah looked at her daughter, at the miracle she had carried for 9 months, at the reason she had kept fighting when everyone told her to give up. "Her name is Hope," she said, "because that's what she is. That's what this place is. That's what I found when I thought I had lost everything." Martha was crying. Even Elena's eyes were wet. "Hope Mitchell," Martha repeated. "Born in the cabin her mother built with her own hands. That's a story for the ages." Sarah held her daughter close and watched the fire dance in the fireplace she had constructed stone by stone. "It's just the beginning," she said. "We're just getting started." Outside, the January sun broke through the clouds and painted the snow in shades of gold. Inside, a mother held her newborn daughter in a home that had risen from ruins, and somewhere Sarah was sure Daniel was watching. He had always believed that anything broken could be fixed. Now, finally, Sarah believed it too. Hope was 3 days old when the first stranger arrived. Sarah was nursing by the fire, exhausted in a way she had never known existed, when Honey started barking at the door. Not the friendly bark she used for people she knew. Something different. A warning. "Who is it?" Sarah called out, pulling a blanket over herself and the baby. No answer, just the sound of footsteps on the porch. Heavy, deliberate. The door opened without a knock. A woman stood in the doorway. She was maybe 60, tall and thin, with silver hair pulled back tight, and eyes that burned with something Sarah couldn't name. Behind her, a man in a sheriff's uniform waited with his hand on his belt. "Sarah Mitchell." The woman's voice was cold. "Who's asking?" "My name is Catherine Reyes." The woman stepped inside without being invited. "Elena Reyes was my daughter-in-law. Thomas was my son." Sarah's blood went cold. Thomas Reyes, the man who had hung himself in the barn on Christmas morning, the third family to die at Widow's Peak. "Mrs. Reyes, You've been telling stories about my son." Catherine's voice cracked like a whip. "Stories about curses and tragedies, stories that make him sound like a madman." "I never said that. You told the whole world that this cabin was cursed, that 3 families died here, that my son killed himself because of something wrong with this place." Catherine moved closer, and Sarah instinctively held Hope tighter. "My son was not crazy. He was not cursed. He was sick. He had depression that none of us knew about until it was too late. I know that. I never blamed him. You turned his death into entertainment." Catherine's face twisted with grief and rage. "You turned my grandchildren's worst nightmare into a story to make yourself famous. Do you know what it's like for them to see their father's death on every news channel, to have strangers ask them about the Christmas morning they found his body?" Sarah felt sick. She hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered how the story might affect the people who had actually lived through the tragedy. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never meant to hurt anyone." Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a document. "This is a cease and desist order. You are to stop telling stories about my son. You are to stop using his death to promote yourself. And you are to remove any reference to the Reyes family from your property." "I can't do that. The history of this place is part of what I'm building here." "Then we'll see you in court." Catherine turned toward the door, then stopped. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think building a cabin makes you special? My son built things too. He was a carpenter, the best in the county, and this place destroyed him anyway." She walked out without another word. The sheriff followed, tipping his hat apologetically at Sarah as he went. Hope started crying. Sarah held her close, rocking gently, her mind racing. A lawsuit. Just when she thought the worst was over. Martha arrived 20 minutes later. "I heard Catherine Reyes was here." Martha's face was grim. What did she want? Sarah showed her the cease and desist order. Martha read it twice, her expression getting darker with each line. "This is garbage," she said finally. "She doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. You haven't defamed anyone. You've just told the truth about what happened here. The truth is what's hurting her. The truth is going to hurt no matter what. That doesn't make it your fault." Martha set the document down. "I know Catherine. She's been angry since Thomas died. Angry at him for leaving. Angry at Elena for not saving him. Angry at the world for taking her son." She paused. "She needs someone to blame. Right now, that someone is you." "What do I do?" "Nothing. You don't respond to this. You don't engage with her. You keep doing what you're doing." Martha looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. "You've got more important things to focus on." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That Catherine Reyes wasn't the type to let things go. She was right. February brought cold that made January seem warm. Sarah worked when she could, which wasn't often. A newborn demanded things that couldn't be scheduled or postponed. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were eaten standing up. Every plan she made got interrupted by cries that needed answering. But the work continued anyway. Tommy and Kevin came every day, even when Sarah couldn't supervise. They built the workshop foundation in the first week of February. Peterson taught them techniques he'd learned half a century ago. Robert Chen donated materials from his ranch. "You don't have to keep doing this," Sarah told Tommy one afternoon, while Hope napped in a carrier strapped to her chest. "I can pay you now. I have money." "Don't want your money." "Then why?" Tommy stopped working, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "My dad left when I was 6, he said. "Just walked out one day and never came back. Mom raised 4 boys on her own, worked 3 jobs, never complained, never asked for help." He picked up his hammer again. "You remind me of her, the way you just keep going no matter what, the way you make people want to help even when you don't ask. Tommy, I'm not doing this for you," he continued. "I'm doing it because someday I'm going to have a family of my own, and I want to be the kind of man who shows up, who builds things, who doesn't run away when things get hard." He smiled slightly. "You're teaching me how to be that man. So no, I don't want your money. I want to earn something more valuable than that." Sarah didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Just went back to work beside him. Hope sleeping against her heart. The lawsuit arrived on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Sarah almost laughed at the timing. Catherine Reyes wasn't bluffing. She was suing Sarah for defamation, emotional distress, and exploitation of private family tragedy. She was asking for $500,000 in damages. $500,000? Sarah stared at the document in disbelief. "I don't have $500,000. I don't have anything close to that." "You don't have to have it," said Margaret Wells, the lawyer Martha had found for her. Margaret was 72 years old, had practiced law in Montana for 50 years, and looked like someone's grandmother. She was also, according to Martha, the most ruthless attorney in 3 counties. "Catherine knows she won't win. This isn't about money. It's about making your life difficult." "Why would she want to do that?" "Because you succeeded where her son failed." Margaret set down her coffee cup. Thomas Reyes spent 2 years trying to fix that cabin. 2 years of work that went nowhere because he was fighting depression and didn't know it. Then you come along pregnant and alone, and you do in 3 months what he couldn't do in 2 years. You think that doesn't hurt her? "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't, but knowing doesn't change feeling." Margaret gathered her papers. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file a response. I'm going to request the case be dismissed. And in the meantime, you're going to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Don't let her intimidate you. Don't let her silence you. And for God's sake, don't apologize for anything. I already apologized. Then don't do it again. Apologies are admissions of guilt in the hands of a good lawyer. Fortunately for you, her lawyer isn't good. Margaret smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. Mine is. March came with a thaw and a visitor Sarah never expected. She was feeding Hope on the porch, enjoying the first warm day in months, when a car pulled into the driveway. A woman got out. Young, maybe 30, dark hair, eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in years. Mrs. Mitchell. The woman's voice was hesitant, afraid. Yes. My name is Elena Reyes. Sarah's heart stopped. Elena. Thomas's widow. The woman who had written the journal Sarah had used to rebuild the cabin. The mother who had found her husband hanging in the barn on Christmas morning. I shouldn't be here, Elena said quickly. My mother-in-law would kill me if she knew. But I had to come. I had to see what you'd done with this place. How did you... I saw the news. Elena moved closer, her eyes taking in the cabin, the new workshop, the signs of life everywhere. I saw what you built. I read your story. Her voice broke. I read what you said about the journal, about using my plans to save this place. Elena, I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause you pain. You didn't. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. For 12 years I've hated this place. I've blamed it for taking Thomas. I've wanted to burn it to the ground and never think about it again. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But then I saw what you did. I saw you take the same cabin that destroyed my family and turn it into something beautiful. Something that saved lives. She looked at Sarah with an intensity that was almost painful. You proved that the cabin wasn't evil, that it wasn't cursed, that it was just a building waiting for someone strong enough to love it. Elena, you gave me peace, Mrs. Mitchell. For the first time in 12 years, I can think about Thomas without hating this place. I can remember the good times we had here before everything went wrong. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. I want you to have this. She handed it to Sarah. Inside the cloth was a wooden picture frame, hand-carved with a photograph inside. It showed a young couple standing in front of the cabin. The man was handsome, smiling, his arm around his wife's waist. The woman was Elena, younger and happier than the woman standing before Sarah now. That was our first day here, Elena said. Before the darkness came, before I lost him. I can't take this. Please. Elena's voice was desperate. I need you to have it. I need this place to hold something of our happiness, something that proves we weren't always broken. Sarah looked at the photograph, at the faces of a family that had dreamed the same dreams she had dreamed, at the proof that hope and tragedy could exist in the same space. I'll hang it in the cabin, she said, right next to the heart my husband carved for our first home. Elena hugged her then, a fierce, desperate embrace that spoke of grief and gratitude, and the strange way that strangers can become connected through shared pain. Thank you, Elena whispered. Thank you for saving what I couldn't. She left before Sarah could respond, drove away without looking back. Sarah stood on the porch for a long time, holding the photograph, wondering how a place that had caused so much pain could also create so much healing. The answer came to her slowly, like dawn breaking over the mountains. The cabin wasn't cursed. It never had been. It was just waiting. Waiting for someone to love it right. April brought spring and a discovery that changed everything. Sarah was cleaning out the workshop, preparing for the first classes she planned to teach, when she found a loose board in the floor. Underneath was a metal box rusted with age. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to the same person, Henrik Henderson. Sarah remembered the photograph she'd found in the rafters months ago. Henrik and Anna Henderson. The first couple to live in the cabin. The family that had frozen to death in the blizzard of 1952. She took the letters inside and started reading. They were from Anna to Henrik, written during their courtship before they were married. Love letters, full of hope and dreams and plans for the future. My dearest Henrik, one letter began, I cannot wait until we are married and living in our cabin in Montana. I know everyone thinks we are crazy to move so far from home, but I believe in us. I believe that together we can build something wonderful, something that will last forever. Sarah's hands were shaking. She kept reading. Letter after letter. A love story playing out across faded paper and decades of dust. The last letter was different. It was from Henrik to Anna, dated December 15, 1952, 3 weeks before they died. My dearest Anna, it read, the winter has been harder than we expected. The roof needs repairs I cannot afford. The children are sick with colds that won't go away. I am beginning to fear that we made a mistake coming here. But then I look at you, and I remember why we came. We came to build a life together. We came to prove that love is stronger than circumstance. We came to give our children something to believe in. I do not know what the future holds, but I know that whatever happens, I will face it with you by my side. You are my home, Anna. You have always been my home. The cabin is just where we keep our things. With all my love, Henrik. Sarah was crying by the time she finished. 3 weeks after he wrote those words, Henrik Henderson and his entire family were dead. Frozen in a cabin that couldn't protect them from a storm no one saw coming. But his love had survived. His words had survived. And now, 70 years later, Sarah was holding the proof that the first family to live in this cabin had loved each other just as fiercely as she had loved Daniel. She took the letters to the Henderson granddaughter, the woman who had come to see the cabin months ago, and wept for her mother. I thought you should have these, Sarah said. The granddaughter, whose name was Rose, read the letters with tears streaming down her face. I never knew, she whispered. I never knew they loved each other like this. All I knew was that they died, that this place killed them. The place didn't kill them. The storm did. The circumstances did. Sarah touched Rose's hand gently. But their love survived. It's been here all along, waiting to be found. Rose looked at her with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. You're doing something important here, Rose said. Something more important than you know. You're proving that love doesn't die just because people do, that it stays in the walls and the wood and the earth waiting for someone to find it again. I'm just building a cabin. No. Rose shook her head. You're building a testament, a proof of concept. She smiled through her tears. You're proving that hope is stronger than history. May arrived with warmth and a miracle Sarah hadn't dared to expect. The lawsuit was dismissed. Margaret called with the news on May 3rd. Judge threw it out this morning, said Catherine had no standing to sue for defamation when everything you said was documented fact. Also said she was wasting the court's time. What does that mean for Catherine? It means she's angry, it means she's embarrassed, and it means she has no legal recourse left. Margaret paused. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. Legal battles end. Personal battles don't. Catherine is going to hate you for the rest of her life. That's something you're going to have to live with. I can live with it. Can you? Sarah thought about the question, about Elena's visit, about the letters she'd found, about all the love and loss that this place had witnessed over 70 years. Yes, she said finally. I can, because I didn't do anything wrong. I told the truth. I built something good, and if Catherine can't see that it's not my problem to fix. That's the first time I've heard you say something like that. I've been learning. From who? Sarah looked out the window at the cabin she had built, at the workshop taking shape beside it, at Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib. From everyone, she said. From everyone who came before me, and everyone who's helping me now. From the people who died here and the people who survived. From my husband and my daughter and a dog who believed in me before anyone else did." She paused. "I've been learning that strength isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about letting people help you. It's about accepting that you're part of something bigger than your own story." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. "Well," she said, "sounds like you've figured out what most people never do." "What's that?" "That life isn't a solo project. It's a community effort." Margaret's voice softened. "Keep building, Sarah. Keep teaching. Keep proving that broken things can be fixed." "I will." "And Sarah?" "Yes. Happy Mother's Day, a few days early." Sarah smiled. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything." She hung up and walked outside where Hope was sleeping in a carrier on the porch and Honey was lying in a patch of sunlight. The lawsuit was over. The winter was over. The hardest part she had thought was over. She was wrong. June 15th brought a phone call that stopped Sarah's heart. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Patterson. I need you to come to the clinic right away." "What's wrong? Is it Hope? Is something wrong with Hope?" "Just come to the clinic, Mrs. Mitchell, please." Sarah drove faster than she'd ever driven in her life. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. Every worst-case scenario played through her mind on repeat. When she arrived, Dr. Patterson was waiting in the lobby. Her expression was serious. "Mrs. Mitchell, please sit down. Tell me what's wrong with my daughter." "Your daughter is fine." Dr. Patterson took a breath. "This isn't about Hope. It's about you." The world tilted. "What do you mean?" "The blood work we did at your last checkup. We found something abnormal." Dr. Patterson handed her a folder. "We need to run more tests. But there's a possibility, a small possibility, that you have an autoimmune condition." "What kind of condition?" "We don't know yet. That's why we need more tests." Dr. Patterson leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, I want to be clear. This isn't a death sentence. Many people live normal, healthy lives with autoimmune conditions. But you need to take care of yourself. You've been pushing yourself incredibly hard for the past 8 months. Your body is telling you to slow down." Sarah stared at the folder in her hands, at the test results that might mean nothing or might mean everything. "I can't slow down," she said quietly. "I have a daughter to raise, a workshop to build, people counting on me. And none of that matters if you're too sick to do it." Dr. Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. "You've proven you can survive anything. Now prove you're smart enough to ask for help when you need it." Sarah left the clinic in a daze. She sat in her truck for 20 minutes, unable to move, unable to think. She had fought so hard, survived so much, built so many things from nothing. And now her own body might be the thing that finally defeated her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. "Workshop's almost done. Come see when you get a chance." She looked at the message, at the proof that life was continuing even while her world was falling apart. Then she started the truck and drove home. She had work to do. She had a daughter to raise. She had a life to live, however long that life might be. And she wasn't going to waste a single day of it on fear. The workshop opened on July 4th, Independence Day. Sarah stood on the porch of the main cabin, Hope in her arms, watching the crowd gather for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Tommy was there. Peterson, Martha, Robert Chen, the Henderson granddaughter, Elena Reyes, who had driven 6 hours to attend. Even David Morrison had come with Jennifer and the kids. Lily ran straight to Honey and threw her arms around the dog's neck. "Welcome to Hope's Haven," Sarah said when the crowd quieted. "That's what we're calling this place now. Not Widow's Peak, not the Henderson place, not any of the names that remind us of tragedy. Hope's Haven. Because that's what it is. A place where hope lives." She paused, fighting the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. 8 months ago, I bought this property for $1. Everyone told me I was crazy. Everyone told me this place was cursed. Everyone told me I should give up and go home. She smiled slightly. I didn't listen. And look what happened. She gestured at the workshop at the cabin at the crowd of people who had gathered to celebrate. I didn't build this alone. I couldn't have. I built it with the help of everyone here and dozens of people who aren't here. I built it on the foundation of families who came before me and dreamed the same dreams I dreamed. Her voice caught. I built it because I believe that broken things can be fixed, that cursed places can become blessed, that a pregnant widow with nothing but $1 and a dream can create something worth creating. She held up a pair of scissors. This workshop is going to teach people to build, not just buildings, lives, futures, hope. She cut the ribbon. Welcome to Hope's Haven. Let's get to work. The crowd cheered. Hope gurgled happily in her arms. Honey barked once as if adding her approval. And Sarah Mitchell, widow, mother, builder, survivor, smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if her body would cooperate with her dreams. Didn't know if the peace she'd found would last. But she knew one thing for certain. She had built something worth building. And whatever came next, no one could take that away. The test results came back on July 20th. Sarah sat in Dr. Patterson's office with Hope sleeping in her carrier, staring at words she didn't fully understand. Lupus. Autoimmune. Chronic. Manageable. What does this mean? She asked, her voice steady, despite the terror clawing at her chest. It means your immune system is attacking your own body, Dr. Patterson explained. The pregnancy likely triggered it. Hormonal changes, stress, physical exhaustion. All of it combined to wake something up that might have stayed dormant forever. Am I dying? No. Dr. Patterson leaned forward. Sarah, lupus is serious. But it's not a death sentence. People live full, productive lives with this condition. They raise children. They work. They build things. She paused. But they have to take care of themselves. They have to rest. They have to accept help. I don't know how to do that. Then you're going to learn. Sarah drove home in silence. Hope slept peacefully, unaware that her mother's world had just shifted on its axis. Lupus. A word she had barely heard before. Now it was part of her identity, part of her future, part of everything she would have to consider for the rest of her life. She pulled into the driveway and sat in the truck for 10 minutes, unable to move. Martha found her there. Sarah. The older woman opened the truck door. Her face creased with concern. What happened? What did the doctor say? Sarah handed her the paperwork. Martha read it slowly, her expression growing more serious with each line. Lupus, Martha said finally. Yes. My sister had lupus, lived to be 83. Martha handed back the papers. Raised 5 kids, ran a business, outlived 2 husbands and a whole lot of people who told her she couldn't. How? By being too stubborn to die. Martha's voice softened. Sound like anyone you know? Sarah almost laughed. Almost. I'm scared, Martha. Good. You should be. Fear keeps you careful. Martha took her hand. But fear doesn't get to make your decisions. You do. And you've already proven that you can do impossible things. This is just one more. The first flare came in August. Sarah woke on August 8th, feeling like her body had been filled with broken glass. Every joint ached. Every muscle screamed. She could barely lift her arms to pick up Hope. Mama! Hope was 7 months old now, starting to babble sounds that almost sounded like words. Mama! I'm here, baby. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. Mama's here, she called Martha. Couldn't call anyone else. Couldn't admit to anyone else that she was falling apart. Martha arrived in 15 minutes, took one look at Sarah and picked up the phone. Tommy, get over here, now. Bring your mother. Within an hour, Sarah's cabin was full of people. Tommy took over the workshop classes she had scheduled. June Blackwood took charge of Hope. Peterson arrived with soup his wife had made. Robert Chen brought groceries. You should have called sooner, Martha scolded, forcing Sarah to drink water. "You should have called the moment you felt it coming." "I thought I could push through." "You can't push through lupus. It pushes back." Martha sat beside her on the bed. "This is what community is for Sarah. Not just for building things. For carrying each other when we can't carry ourselves." "I hate this." "I know. Hate it all you want. But let us help you anyway." The flare lasted 5 days. 5 days of pain and exhaustion and the terrifying realization that her body could betray her without warning. 5 days of watching other people care for her daughter, run her workshop, live the life she had built. On the 6th day, she woke up feeling almost normal. "Thank God," she breathed, sitting up slowly, testing each joint. Hope was sleeping in her crib where June had put her the night before. Honey was lying by the doortail, wagging tentatively. "I'm okay, girl," Sarah said. "I'm okay." She wasn't sure if she was talking to the dog or to herself. September brought a visitor who changed everything. His name was James Walker. He was 52 years old, a retired contractor from Seattle, and he had driven 3,000 miles to see the woman who had built Hope's Haven. "I read your story," he said, standing on her porch with his hat in his hands. "Every article, every interview, every piece of information I could find." "Why?" "Because my wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. And after she was gone, I didn't see the point in anything anymore. I stopped working, stopped building, stopped living." His voice cracked. "Then I read about you. A pregnant widow who bought a cursed cabin for $1 and turned it into something beautiful. And I thought if she can do that, maybe I can find a reason to keep going too." Sarah didn't know what to say. This stranger had driven across the country because her story had given him hope. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want to help. I want to build things again. I want to feel useful." James looked at the workshop, at the cabin, at the property that Sarah had transformed from ruin to refuge. "I don't need money. I don't need recognition. I just need a reason to get up in the morning." Sarah thought about the past year, about all the people who had showed up when she needed them most, about how community had saved her life in ways she never could have anticipated. "Can you teach?" she asked. "I taught apprentices for 30 years. "Then welcome to Hope's Haven, James. We've got work to do." James Walker was the first. He wasn't the last. October brought 3 more volunteers: a retired electrician named Margaret, a young woman named Casey who had lost her job and her apartment and was looking for a fresh start, a veteran named David, different from David Morrison, who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and was struggling to find purpose in civilian life. They came because they had heard Sarah's story. They stayed because they found something at Hope's Haven that they couldn't find anywhere else. "What are you building here?" Casey asked one evening, watching the sunset over the property that now included 4 structures and plans for more. "I don't know anymore," Sarah admitted. "It started as a cabin. Then it became a workshop. Now it's becoming something else. Something I can't quite name yet." "A sanctuary," Casey suggested. "Maybe. A community." "That too." "A proof," Casey said quietly, "that broken people can build unbroken things." Sarah looked at her, surprised by the insight. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what it is." November 3rd marked 1 year since Sarah had bought the cabin for $1. Martha organized a celebration without asking permission. By noon, over 100 people had gathered at Hope's Haven, people from town, volunteers who had helped over the past year, strangers who had driven from as far as California to be part of the anniversary. 1 year ago, Martha said, standing on the porch of the original cabin, a pregnant widow walked into my store and told me she was going to build a home. I thought she was crazy. I thought she would be dead by Christmas. The crowd laughed. I was wrong. Martha's voice grew serious. Sarah Mitchell isn't crazy. She's the sanest person I've ever met. Because she understands something that most of us forget. That love doesn't die when people do. that buildings can hold hope just as well as they hold heat, that $1 spent on something you believe in is worth more than $1,000,000 spent on fear. She turned to Sarah, who was standing nearby with hope in her arms. Sarah, you didn't just build a cabin. You built a movement. You proved that one person with enough determination can change the world. Martha raised her glass. To Sarah Mitchell, to Hope's Haven, to the next 100 years of miracles. The crowd cheered. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she managed. Thank you all. But even as she spoke the words, she saw something that made her heart stop. A figure at the edge of the crowd, a woman with silver hair and eyes that burned with something that looked like hatred. Catherine Reyes had come to the celebration. Sarah handed Hope to Martha without explanation and walked toward Catherine. Mrs. Reyes, I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to come. Catherine's voice was flat. But I had to see it for myself. This thing you've built, this monument to your own success. It's not a monument to me, it's a community. A community built on my son's grave. Catherine stepped closer, and Sarah could see the tears in her eyes, the grief that time hadn't healed. Do you know what today is, Mrs. Mitchell? Besides your precious anniversary? Sarah didn't answer. Today would have been Thomas's 45th birthday. Catherine's voice cracked. 45 years old. He should be here. He should be celebrating with his children. Instead, he's in a cemetery and you're throwing a party. Mrs. Reyes, I'm so sorry. Stop saying you're sorry. Catherine's composure finally shattered. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that this place destroyed my son, and now everyone acts like it's some kind of miracle. The crowd had gone quiet. People were watching, unsure what to do. It's not a miracle, Sarah said quietly. It's just hard work and help from people who care. That's all it's ever been. Then why couldn't Thomas do it? He worked hard. He cared. He tried to fix this place for 2 years. Catherine was crying now, openly, her anger dissolving into raw grief. Why did this cabin kill him and save you? What makes you so special? Sarah felt something shift inside her. Something she had been avoiding for months. Nothing, she said. Nothing makes me special. I just got lucky. Lucky? I got help. People showed up for me when I needed them. I had Martha and Tommy and Peterson and all these people who decided to care about a stranger. Sarah's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. Thomas didn't have that. He was fighting alone. And fighting alone against this place, against his own mind, against everything that was trying to break him. It wasn't a fair fight. Catherine stared at her. If I had been alone, Sarah continued, I would have died too. In that first storm. Or the second. Or somewhere along the way when the lupus started and my body gave out. I survived because of community. Thomas died because he didn't have one. He had family. He had me. Family isn't always enough. Sometimes you need strangers who become family. Sometimes you need a whole village of people who show up just because it's the right thing to do. Sarah took a breath. Mrs. Reyes, I can't bring your son back. I can't undo what happened. But I can try to make sure it never happens again. That's what Hope's Haven is. It's a place where people don't have to fight alone. Catherine was silent for a long moment. The crowd held its breath. Then, something happened that no one expected. Catherine Reyes began to cry. Not the angry tears of before. Something deeper. Something that had been locked away for 15 years. He called me, she whispered. The night before he died. He called me and said he needed help, and I told him to be strong. I told him that Reyes men didn't ask for help. I told him to figure it out on his own. Sarah felt her heart break. I killed my son, Catherine sobbed. I told him to be strong, and he went out to that barn, and he died because I was too proud to let him be weak. Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the woman who had tried to destroy her. Catherine collapsed against her, crying 15 years of guilt and grief into the shoulder of the woman she had blamed for everything. "It wasn't your fault," Sarah murmured. "It wasn't anyone's fault. Depression lies. It tells you that you're alone even when you're not. It tells you that no one cares even when they do." Thomas believed the lie. "That's not your fault." They stood there for a long time. Two women who had lost everything holding each other in front of 100 strangers who had become family. When Catherine finally pulled away, something in her eyes had changed. "I'm sorry," she said. "For the lawsuit. For everything I said. I was so angry. So lost." "I know. Can you forgive me?" Sarah thought about the question. About all the pain Catherine had caused. About the sleepless nights, and the legal bills, and the stress that might have contributed to her lupus. "Yes," she said. "I can." Catherine looked at the cabin, at the workshop, at the crowd of people who had gathered to celebrate what Sarah had built. "My son would have loved this," she said quietly. "He always wanted to create something that would help people. He just never got the chance." "Then help me continue his dream," Sarah said. "Stay. Be part of what we're building here." Catherine stared at her in disbelief. "After everything I did. Especially after everything you did. Because if Hope's Haven can't forgive, then it's not really a haven at all." Catherine Reyes moved to Pinewood 3 weeks later. She rented a small house near the edge of town and started volunteering at the workshop every weekend. She taught woodworking, the skills her son had learned and passed on before he died. She told stories about Thomas, the good ones, the ones that reminded everyone that he had been more than his death. "You're insane," Tommy told Sarah one afternoon. "That woman tried to destroy you." "She tried to survive the only way she knew how," Sarah replied. "Same as all of us." "You really believe that?" "I have to, because if I don't believe people can change, then what's the point of anything I'm building here?" Tommy didn't have an answer for that. December came with snow and a milestone Sarah had almost forgotten: Hope's first birthday. The celebration was small, just close friends and the volunteers who had become family. Martha baked a cake. Peterson carved a wooden toy. Catherine Reyes brought a gift that made Sarah cry. It was a photograph of Thomas as a baby held in the arms of a mother who loved him more than life itself. "I want Hope to know him," Catherine said. "I want her to know that she's growing up in a place that holds his memory, that he's part of this story too." Sarah hung the photograph next to the wooden heart Daniel had carved, next to Henrik Henderson's love letter, next to Elena Reyes's picture of happier times. The wall was becoming a memorial, a testament to all the love that had lived and died in this place. "What are you doing, Mama?" Hope asked. She was walking now, her first steps having come just a week earlier, and she was into everything. "I'm remembering, baby. I'm remembering all the people who came before us." "Why?" "Because they're part of our family, even the ones we never met." Hope didn't understand. She was only 1 year old, but someday she would. Someday she would look at this wall and understand that she was part of something bigger than herself. That was the legacy Sarah was building. Not just buildings, not just a community. A lineage of love that stretched back generations and would continue long after she was gone. January brought the second flare. This one was worse than the first. Sarah couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. The pain was so intense she couldn't hold Hope, couldn't walk to the bathroom, couldn't do anything but lie there and pray for it to end. "You need to go to the hospital," Dr. Patterson said, making a house call on day 2. "I can't leave Hope. Hope has 15 people ready to take care of her. You need to take care of yourself." "I can't afford the hospital." "You can't afford to die either." Dr. Patterson's voice was sharp. "Sarah, listen to me. Lupus flares can cause permanent damage if they're not treated properly. You could lose kidney function. You could have a stroke. You could die. Is your pride worth that?" Sarah thought about Hope, about the workshop, about the community that depended on her. No, she said finally. It's not. She spent 4 days in the hospital in Kalispell. The doctors adjusted her medication, ran tests, monitored her recovery. When she finally came home, she was weaker than she had ever been in her life. But she was alive. We need to talk, Martha said on Sarah's first day back. About the future. I know. You can't keep doing this alone. Running the workshop, managing the volunteers, taking care of Hope, maintaining the property. Martha's voice was gentle but firm. You need to delegate. You need to build something that can survive without you. It already can survive without me. These past 4 days proved that. That's not what I mean. Martha sat down heavily. Sarah, what happens if you get really sick? What happens if the next flare puts you in the hospital for a month, or permanently? I don't want to think about that. You have to think about it, because you have a daughter who depends on you, and a community that believes in what you're building. If you want Hope's Haven to last, you need to create systems that don't require you to be present for every decision. Sarah knew Martha was right. She had known it for months. But accepting it meant accepting her own mortality, her own limitations, her own impermanence. Help me, she said. Help me figure out how to let go. The transition took months. Sarah created a board of directors with Martha as chair. She hired James Walker as full-time workshop director. She established protocols for emergencies, procedures for volunteers, systems for everything that had previously existed only in her head. You're building an institution, David Morrison told her during one of his visits. He was writing a follow-up article on Hope's Haven for the 2-year anniversary. Something that will outlive all of us. That's the idea. Most people don't think that way. Most people build for themselves. I did build for myself, for me and Hope and Daniel. Sarah looked at her daughter, now 18 months old, and running everywhere, fearless and fierce. But somewhere along the way, it became bigger than that. It became about everyone who needs a place to heal. Everyone who needs a reason to hope. That's what I'm going to write about, David said. Not just the cabin, not just the story, the transformation. How one woman's grief became a whole community's salvation. That sounds too poetic. It's the truth. David smiled. And sometimes the truth is poetry. March 15th. The day everything almost fell apart. Sarah was in the workshop teaching a class when the fire started. She didn't see it begin. None of them did. By the time someone smelled smoke, the storage shed behind the main cabin was fully engulfed. Fire. The scream came from Catherine, who had been organizing supplies nearby. Fire everyone out. Sarah's first thought was Hope. Her daughter was in the main cabin with June Blackwood. She ran. The smoke was already spreading, pushed by the wind, toward the buildings she had spent 2 years constructing. People were running everywhere, grabbing fire extinguishers, calling 911, trying to contain the impossible. Sarah burst through the cabin door. Hope, June? We're here. June's voice came from the back bedroom. We're fine, but we can't get out. The smoke is too thick. Sarah grabbed a wet towel, covered her face, and pushed through the smoke toward her daughter's cries. The heat was intense. The air was poison. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. She found them huddled in the corner of the bedroom, June shielding Hope with her body. Take her, June shouted, pushing Hope into Sarah's arms. Get her out. Come with me. I can't see the smoke. I can't. Sarah grabbed June's arm with her free hand and pulled. Together, carrying Hope between them, they stumbled toward the door. The world had turned to gray. Sarah couldn't see the exit, couldn't see anything but smoke, and the faint orange glow of flames somewhere too close. Then hands were grabbing her. Tommy's voice shouting her name. Fresh air hitting her face like a miracle. Get back! Everyone get back! Sarah collapsed on the ground, clutching Hope to her chest, gasping for air. Her lungs were screaming. Her eyes were streaming. But her daughter was safe. Her daughter was alive. The fire department arrived 11 minutes later. They saved the main cabin. They saved the workshop. They couldn't save the storage shed or the small structure next to it that had been planned as an expansion. Total damage, 2 buildings destroyed. Months of supplies gone. Thousands of dollars in equipment reduced to ash. Sarah sat on the ground with Hope in her arms and watched everything burn. It was electrical, the fire chief told her an hour later. Old wiring in the storage shed. Could have happened any time. We had that building inspected 6 months ago. Inspections miss things, especially in older structures. He looked at the ruins still smoldering. You're lucky it wasn't worse. A few more minutes and the whole property would have gone up. Lucky. Sarah almost laughed. She had lupus. She had almost died. She had lost 2 buildings, and she was supposed to feel lucky. But then she looked at Hope, at the volunteers gathering to help, at the community that had already started talking about rebuilding. Maybe she was lucky. Maybe luck wasn't about avoiding disaster. Maybe it was about surviving it. The rebuilding started the next day. No one had to be asked. No one had to be organized. People just showed up with tools and materials, and the determination to undo what the fire had done. This is what community means, Catherine Reyes said, working alongside the woman she had once tried to destroy. This is what Thomas never had. This is what we're building, Sarah replied. Not just structures, a safety net, a family that shows up no matter what. The new storage building was better than the old one. Fireproofed, properly wired, built to code and then some. The volunteers worked for 3 weeks straight, refusing to stop until it was done. On April 3rd, exactly 1 year before Hope's 3rd birthday, the rebuilding was complete. Sarah stood on the porch of her cabin, looking at everything she had created. The workshop, the new storage building, the community center that was taking shape where the expansion had been planned. Not bad for a pregnant widow with $1, Tommy said, appearing beside her. Not bad at all. What's next? Sarah thought about the question, about everything she had survived, about everything she had lost, about everything she had gained. More, she said finally. Whatever comes next, we build more. Tommy nodded, didn't ask for clarification, didn't need to. That was the thing about Hope's Haven. It wasn't about any one person. It wasn't about Sarah or her story or her dollar or her cabin. It was about the belief that broken things could be fixed, that cursed places could become blessed, that love was stronger than grief and hope was stronger than fear. It was about building something that would last. And Sarah Mitchell, widow, mother, survivor, was just getting started. 5 years passed, like water through open fingers. Hope was 6 years old now, fearless and fierce with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. She could swing a hammer better than most adults. She could identify 12 different types of wood by sight. She could explain load-bearing walls to anyone who would listen. "Mama," she asked one morning over breakfast, "why did Daddy die?" Sarah set down her coffee cup. This question had come before many times, but never quite like this. There was something different in Hope's voice, something older. His brain stopped working, baby. It was no one's fault. But why? Sometimes bodies break, even young, strong bodies, even bodies that belong to people we love. Hope considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. Like your body, when you get sick? Sarah felt her heart clench. The lupus flares had become part of their life, predictable in their unpredictability. Hope had learned to recognize the signs, had learned to call Martha or Tommy when Mama couldn't get out of bed. "Yes," Sarah said carefully. "Like my body. But I'm still here, aren't I? For now." The words hit Sarah like a punch. For now. Her 6-year-old daughter had already learned that people leave, that bodies fail, that love doesn't guarantee forever. "Come here," Sarah said, pulling Hope onto her lap. "I need to tell you something important." "What?" I'm going to die someday. Everyone does. I don't know when, but someday I won't be here anymore. Hope's eyes filled with tears. Don't say that. I have to say it because you need to understand something else. Sarah took her daughter's face in her hands. When I'm gone, this place will still be here. The cabin, the workshop, all the people who love you. That's why I built it. Not just for me, for you, for everyone who comes after us. But I want you. I know, baby. I want me too. Sarah smiled through her own tears. But wanting doesn't stop death. Building does. We build things that last longer than we do. We build love into walls and hope into foundations. And when we're gone, the building stays. The love stays. The hope stays. Hope was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Is that why you bought the cabin for $1? So I would have something when you died." Sarah hadn't thought about it that way. Not consciously, but hearing the words from her daughter's mouth, she realized it was true. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly why." The documentary crew arrived in September. David Morrison had pitched the idea 2 years earlier, but it had taken this long to secure funding and organize production. Now a team of 12 people descended on Hope's Haven cameras everywhere asking questions Sarah had answered 100 times before. "Tell us about the day you bought the cabin," the director said. "Tell us about the storm on Christmas Eve. Tell us about the Morrison family. Tell us about the fire." Sarah told them everything. But the hardest part wasn't the interviews. It was watching them film her life, her community, her daughter, turning something real and messy and complicated into a story with a beginning, middle, and end. "How does it feel?" the director asked on the third day of filming. "To see your life become a movie?" "Strange," Sarah admitted. "Like watching someone else, someone braver than I feel." "You don't feel brave." "I feel tired." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I feel like I've been running a marathon for 6 years and no one told me where the finish line is." "Maybe there isn't one." "That's what I'm afraid of." The documentary filmed for 3 weeks. They captured the workshop classes, the volunteer meetings, the daily rhythm of a community that had grown from one woman's desperate dream into something that supported over 200 people a year. They filmed Hope learning to read blueprints from Tommy, who had become like an uncle to her. They filmed Catherine Reyes teaching woodworking, her grief transformed into purpose. They filmed Martha Chen, now 70 years old, still running the hardware store and still showing up whenever Sarah needed her. "What's the most important thing you've learned?" the director asked Sarah on the final day. "That I was wrong about everything." "What do you mean?" "I thought I was building a cabin. I was wrong. I was building a family." Sarah looked at the camera with eyes that had seen too much and still believed in everything. "I thought I was saving myself. I was wrong. I was being saved by everyone who showed up to help. I thought I could do it alone. I was wrong. Nobody does anything alone." She paused. "And I thought love ended when people died. I was wrong about that too. Love doesn't end. It just changes shape. It becomes buildings and communities and children who carry it forward. It becomes stories that people tell around fires. It becomes hope." The documentary premiered at Sundance in January of the following year. Sarah didn't attend. She was in the middle of a flare, the worst one in 3 years, and Dr. Patterson had forbidden travel. So she watched from her bed in the cabin she had built, Hope curled up beside her as the film played on a laptop propped against her knees. The opening shot was the cabin in winter smoke, rising from the chimney light glowing in the windows. A voiceover began. "On November 3, 2019, a pregnant widow bought a cursed cabin for $1. What happened next changed everything." Sarah cried through the entire 93 minutes. Not because it was sad, because it was true. Because seeing her life laid out like that from the auction to the present day showed her something she had been too close to see. She had built something impossible, something that would outlast her, something that mattered. "Mama." Hope's voice was small. Are you okay? I'm okay, baby. I'm just proud. Of what? Of us. Of everyone. Of this whole crazy, beautiful thing we've made. The documentary won the audience award. Then it won distribution. Then it won a conversation that spread across the country about community and resilience and what ordinary people could do when they decided to be extraordinary. Donations poured in. Volunteer applications overwhelmed the system. Media requests filled Sarah's inbox faster than she could delete them. You're famous, Tommy said, standing in her kitchen with a stack of letters from people who had seen the film. I don't want to be famous. Too late. I want to be healthy. I want to watch my daughter grow up. I want to build one more thing before I die. What thing? Sarah handed him a sketch she had been working on for months, a building design, much larger than anything they had built before. A school, she said, a real school, where people can come for weeks at a time to learn construction, renovation, community building, where they can take what they learn and go back to their own towns and build their own Hope's Havens. Tommy studied the sketch. This would take millions of dollars. I know. And years to build. I know. And you're sick, Sarah. Really sick. The doctors said. I know what the doctors said. Sarah's voice was sharp. They said the same thing 6 years ago. They've been telling me to slow down since the beginning. And every time I slow down, I get sicker. So I'm done slowing down. I'm going to build this school if it kills me. What if it does kill you? Then at least I'll die doing something that matters. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the sketch carefully and put it in his pocket. Okay, he said. Let's build a school. The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for May 15th. On May 14th, Sarah collapsed in the workshop. One moment she was teaching a class on foundation work. The next moment, she was on the floor, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but stare at the ceiling and wonder if this was how it ended. Sarah, Tommy's voice far away. Someone call 911. The ambulance took 23 minutes to arrive. 23 minutes of people she loved gathering around her, crying, praying, refusing to accept what seemed inevitable. Hope pushed through the crowd. Her face was white with terror. Mama, Mama, wake up! Sarah tried to answer. Couldn't. Don't leave me, Hope sobbed. You promised you wouldn't leave me. You promised. The paramedics loaded Sarah onto a stretcher. The last thing she saw before the ambulance doors closed was her daughter's face streaked with tears and Martha Chen holding her back. I love you, Sarah tried to say. The words wouldn't come. Then everything went dark. She woke up 3 days later in the hospital in Kalispell. Dr. Patterson was sitting beside her bed, looking older than Sarah had ever seen her. Welcome back, the doctor said quietly. What happened? Your kidneys failed. The lupus finally caught up with you. Dr. Patterson took a breath. Sarah, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You need a transplant. Without one, you have maybe 6 months. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. 6 months? Maybe less, maybe more. Bodies are unpredictable. Dr. Patterson leaned forward. You're on the transplant list now, but the wait can be years. And with your other health issues, you're not exactly at the top of the priority list. So I'm dying. You've been dying since you bought that cabin, according to everyone who told you it was impossible. Dr. Patterson almost smiled. You've proven them wrong before. Maybe you will again. Sarah lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything she still wanted to do. The school, Hope's graduation, her daughter's wedding, grandchildren she would never hold. Can I see my daughter? She asked. She's been here every day, sleeping in the waiting room, refusing to leave. Send her in. Hope appeared in the doorway looking small and scared and impossibly young. Mama, come here, baby. Hope climbed onto the bed and curled against Sarah's side, careful of the tubes and wires. Are you going to die? Hope asked. I don't know. The doctors say you need a new kidney. I know. Where do you get a new kidney? Someone has to give you one. Someone whose body matches yours. Hope was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I give you mine?" Sarah's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a single breath. "No, baby. You're too young, and you need both of yours." "But I want to save you." "You already have." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. "Every single day you save me, just by being here, just by being you." They lay together in the hospital bed, mother and daughter, and Sarah realized that this might be the last time. That all the buildings she had constructed couldn't protect her from this. That some things couldn't be fixed with hammers and nails and determination. But hope, the thing itself, not just her daughter's name, that could survive anything. That was what she had built. Not walls. Hope. The donor appeared 2 weeks later. Sarah was back at Hope's Haven by then, too sick to work, but too stubborn to stay in the hospital. She spent her days on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the community she had built continue without her. The groundbreaking for the school had been postponed indefinitely. No one wanted to celebrate while Sarah was dying. Then Martha came running across the property with tears streaming down her face. Sarah. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." Martha was laughing and crying at the same time. "They found a donor. A perfect match. You're getting a kidney." Sarah couldn't process the words. "What? How?" "I don't know. The hospital called. They said someone came forward. Anonymous donor. Perfect match." Martha grabbed her hands. "You're going to live, Sarah. You're going to live." The surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. Sarah spent those 3 days saying goodbye to everyone she loved, just in case. She wrote letters to Hope, one for every birthday until she turned 30. She wrote instructions for the school. She wrote thank you notes to everyone who had helped build Hope's Haven. On the morning of the surgery, she asked to be alone for a few minutes. She sat in the cabin she had built with her own hands. Looked at the wall of photographs. Henrik and Anna Henderson. Thomas and Elena Reyes. Daniel's wooden heart. All the love that had lived and died in this place. "I don't know if any of you can hear me," she said out loud. "But I want you to know something. I didn't forget you. I built this place to remember you. And whatever happens today, that memory is going to last. It's going to outlive all of us." She touched Daniel's wooden heart one more time. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. "Or I won't. Either way, I did what you asked. I built something worth building." Then she walked out of the cabin and got in the car that would take her to the hospital. The surgery lasted 7 hours. Sarah spent most of that time on the boundary between life and death, her body fighting to accept a stranger's gift, while doctors worked to make the impossible possible. In the waiting room, the entire population of Hope's Haven had gathered. Tommy and Kevin, Martha and Robert, Catherine Reyes and Elena Reyes side by side, Peterson's widow because Peterson himself had died the year before, James Walker, Casey, David the veteran, all the volunteers who had become family. And Hope sitting in Martha's lap, refusing to cry, refusing to believe that her mother might not wake up. "She's going to be okay," Hope kept saying. "Mama always comes back. She promised." At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Patterson emerged from surgery. Everyone stood. No one breathed. "She made it," the doctor said. "The kidney is functioning. She's going to live." The room exploded. Crying, hugging, prayers of gratitude in languages Sarah would never understand. Hope pushed through the crowd. "Can I see her?" "She's sleeping. She'll sleep for a while, but yes, you can see her." Hope walked into the recovery room alone, climbed onto a chair beside her mother's bed, took Sarah's hand, careful of the IV. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. "I told everyone. Mama always comes back." Sarah's fingers tightened around her daughter's hand. Not awake, not really, but somehow aware. Some connections didn't need consciousness. Some love was deeper than sleep. The identity of the donor remained a mystery for 3 months. Sarah had asked the hospital, but privacy laws prevented them from sharing. She had asked her community, but no one claimed responsibility. She had even asked God in the quiet moments when she was alone with her questions. Then one afternoon, while she was sitting on the porch watching Hope play, a car pulled into the driveway. Gerald Hutchins stepped out. Sarah felt her body go rigid. The banker who had tried to foreclose on her. The man who had shown up with legal documents while she was pregnant and desperate. What was he doing here? "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, walking toward her. He looked different somehow, smaller, less certain. "Mr. Hutchins, I don't know what business we could possibly have. I'm not here on business." He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "I'm here to tell you something I should have told you 3 months ago." "What?" "The kidney. It was mine." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the man who had been her enemy, who had tried to destroy her, who had somehow ended up saving her life. "Why?" she finally managed. "Because I've spent 20 years being the villain in other people's stories, foreclosing on homes, taking everything from people who had nothing left." Hutchins' voice cracked. "After I saw what you did, after I watched you build this place, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About all the people I'd destroyed, about all the homes I'd taken." He sat down heavily on the porch steps. "I got tested on a whim. Didn't really believe I'd be a match. When the hospital called and said I was perfect, I thought they were joking." He looked up at her with eyes that held something Sarah had never seen before. Humility, regret, hope. "I wanted to do one good thing, Mrs. Mitchell. One thing that would balance out all the harm. Giving you a kidney seemed like a start." Sarah was crying. She didn't try to stop it. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first." Hutchins stood brushing off his pants. "You showed me that people can change, that broken things can be fixed, that it's never too late to build something good." He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "I'm quitting the bank, starting a non-profit that helps people save their homes instead of losing them. Going to call it Second Chance Housing." "Mr. Hutchins." "Gerald, please. I think we've earned first names." "Gerald." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "Thank you. I don't have words for what you've done." "You don't need words. You've been saying everything that matters for 6 years." He squeezed her hand gently. "Just keep building, Mrs. Mitchell. Keep proving that miracles are possible." He drove away. Sarah watched until his car disappeared around the bend. Then she looked at Hope, who had stopped playing and was watching her with curious eyes. "Who was that, Mama?" "Someone I thought was my enemy. Turns out he was my savior." "How can someone be both?" "I don't know, baby." Sarah smiled through her tears. "But this place has a way of turning enemies into friends. That's part of the miracle." The school opened on November 3rd, exactly 10 years after Sarah bought the cabin. It was called the Daniel Mitchell School for Community Building. 3 buildings on 20 acres capable of housing 50 students at a time, teaching everything from basic carpentry to advanced community organizing. The opening ceremony drew over 500 people, reporters from every major network, politicians looking for photo opportunities, ordinary people who had traveled from across the country just to see the place they had heard so much about. Sarah stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd, feeling the weight of a decade pressing down on her shoulders. 10 years ago, she began. "I bought a cursed cabin for $1. Everyone told me I was crazy. Everyone told me I would fail. Everyone told me that some things are too broken to fix." She paused. "They were wrong, but not for the reason you might think. They were wrong because I didn't fix the cabin alone. I didn't survive alone. I didn't build this place alone." She gestured at the crowd, at the buildings, at the community that surrounded her. "We did it together. All of us. Every person who showed up when I needed help. Every stranger who became family. Every broken person who found healing here and then helped someone else find healing too." She found Hope in the front row, 15 years old now, tall and strong, and everything Sarah had dreamed she would become. "This school is named after my husband, but it's built for my daughter. And for everyone's daughters, everyone's sons, everyone who comes after us and needs a place to learn that impossible things are possible if you're willing to do the work. She took a breath. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors say I'm doing well, but lupus doesn't make promises. Neither does life. She smiled. But I know this. When I'm gone, this place will still be here. The love we built into these walls will still be here. The hope we planted in this ground will still be growing. And that's enough. That's more than enough. She cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. The school was open. And Sarah Mitchell, widow, mother, builder, survivor, stood in the middle of something that would last forever. On the morning of her 60th birthday, Sarah woke up and knew. Not because she was sick. She felt fine, actually better than she had in years. But there was something in the air, something in the quality of the light, something that whispered to her of endings and beginnings. She got dressed slowly, walked through the cabin one last time, touching everything. The wooden heart Daniel had carved, the photographs on the wall, the fireplace she had built stone by stone. Then she went outside. Hope was waiting on the porch. 30 years old now, a mother herself, her daughter playing in the yard. Happy birthday, Mama. Thank you, baby. How do you feel? Sarah looked at the property, at the school, at the workshop, at the community that had grown from one woman's desperate dream into something that touched thousands of lives every year. Complete, she said. I feel complete. They sat together on the porch, 3 generations of Mitchell women, watching the sun rise over Hope's Haven. I'm not afraid anymore, Sarah said quietly. Afraid of what? Of dying, of leaving, of what happens when I'm gone. She took Hope's hand. I was so scared when your father died. Scared that I would disappear too. Scared that nothing would be left of us. That's why I built all this. To prove that love could survive. And did it? Sarah looked at her granddaughter chasing Honey's successor across the yard. At her daughter, strong and beautiful and carrying everything forward. At the buildings that would stand for generations. Yes, she said. It did. Sarah Mitchell died on a Tuesday peacefully in the cabin she had built with her own hands. She was 67 years old. The funeral drew thousands. People came from every state in the country. People whose lives had been changed by Hope's Haven. People who had never met her, but felt like they knew her from the documentary, from the articles, from the legend that had grown around her name. Hope delivered the eulogy. My mother bought a cursed cabin for $1, she said. And then she spent the rest of her life proving that curses are just stories we tell when we've given up hope. She looked at the crowd, at all the faces of people her mother had touched. She taught me that broken things can be fixed, that love doesn't end when people die, that every building is a love letter to the future. Hope's voice cracked, but she kept going. And she taught me that one person with enough determination can change the world. She paused. My mother is gone now, but Hope's Haven isn't. The school isn't. The community isn't. The love she built into every wall and every foundation and every person she touched, that isn't going anywhere. She smiled through her tears. And neither am I. The cabin still stands. If you visit Hope's Haven today, you'll find it just as Sarah left it. The wooden heart on the wall. The photographs of everyone who came before. The fireplace that draws perfectly because she built it right. You'll find the workshop where hundreds of students have learned to build. The school where thousands have discovered that they're capable of more than they knew. The community that grows every year with people who need a place to heal and a purpose to pursue. And you'll find a simple plaque on the door of the original cabin, Sarah Mitchell, 1991-2058. She bought a cursed cabin for $1. She turned it into a home. She proved that love is stronger than death. Below that, smaller letters, and somewhere a dog's tail is still wagging. Every winter when the snow falls and the wind howls and the Montana cold tries its hardest to break the people who live there, the cabin glows with warmth. Smoke rises from the chimney. Light spills from the windows. and everyone who sees it knows the truth. Some things can't be broken. Some love can't be killed. Some hope can't be extinguished. Sarah Mitchell bought a cursed cabin for $1, and she built a miracle.